All right, fellas, 28-inch, 9 horsepower, Tecumseh powered Craftsman snowblower. And this one's nice. So if you got something similar to this, this is definitely the video for you, right? So what I want to cover in this video is adjusting a carburetor. In this case, it's going to be a replacement HIPA carburetor. And a full adjustment for the throttle, idle, high speed, mixture screws. And that's why I want to kind of be clear about this, because you may have a similar carburetor or the original carburetor that you rebuilt, that you were able to rebuild. This one was not rebuildable, and you can take a look here. It's just, it's a mess. So we put a HIPA carburetor on here. Now, this HIPA carburetor that I got for it is fully adjustable, and that's important because that's what we're really going to be focusing in on in this video is, well, what do you do when you have all of these adjustments that you can make on your carburetor? Like, where do you start, right? Do you do the high-speed mixture screw first? Do you do the idle mixture screw? In this case, I had to adjust the throttle stop, which is what we call curb idle. You know, what if you've touched the governor screw on the side? You know, where do you begin? Like, I've even had some videos where people have asked me, like, what are you really doing on that chainsaw or that blower where you're tweaking those 2 little screws up there, or even the 3 because you've got the one for the throttle stop. So that's what I want to go over. Now, there'll be subsequent videos on this machine to deal with the transmission and lubrication and just general service, which is probably the most common thing. So backing up, let's say you have a carburetor on this engine or something similar, 5 horsepower, 5.5. Even some of the Briggs, especially the older ones, have adjustment screws on the carburetor. And in this case, the original carburetor, which was beat, did not have adjustment screws. So it was what we call fixed jets. So there, the only way to do it there is you have to drill things out. So that's not the case here. So I like to have these screws on there. We're going to go over in this video predominantly how I go about sort of getting things started. And it's a bit of magic and it's a bit of procedure, right? I say procedure because you have to start somewhere. You got to get the motor warm. You got to make sure the motor is clean. You got to make sure you go over the ignition system. Depending on how old your engine is, right? There may be some other issues. So in this case, not only was the carburetor crap, but there was crap in the tank, in the filter, right? If you don't cover those things, yeah, good luck. You're going to be chasing your tail. So you don't want to chase your tail. You want to get the machine all cleaned up nice. Make sure that fuel tank is clean. The fuel filter is replaced, that you've gone over the spark plug and put a new spark plug in it. You've gapped it right or cleaned the plug. That you've gone over the ignition system. You verified spark. I cleaned the ignition system. I cleaned the coil. I took it off. I did all of that, and I re-gapped it at 10 thousandths. Put everything back. And then when you're comfortable and ready, you want to go in a well-lit environment with a good tachometer. And we're going to get started on this video, and I'll show you what I do. So let's get started on it, and I'll try and walk you through this entire scenario a little bit at a time. It'll take a little bit. If you haven't done this before, don't get frustrated. Take your time with it. You got to make sure that the engine is warm. And it means you're going to have to run it for a little while. In this case, it was running a little too high, so you don't want to let it run at 4,000 or 5,000 RPMs. I mean, it could feasibly be that you put the thing on, and, for example, if you're replacing a carburetor and the thing's going, it's freaking out, and, you know, it's coughing and sputtering, you may have to just kind of fudge it to get it to warm up. But then, and I do a little bit of that, but then once you get it good and warm, you should be able to sit down and get this thing tuned. Let's get started on the video. And no, I'm not going to make that noise again, fellas. I know. Can you do that again, Arch? No, fellas. Well, let's get started. All right, fellas, let's give it a prime. All right, there's not much fuel in it. And then we're going to choke it all the way. Let's see what happens. All right. Got it. some reason or other it like it ran out of fuel or something. The RPM seemed a bit high, and not sure why. Let's see if we can get it started again. Not a lot of fuel in it. Might have to put some more. All right. That's not bad, fellas, but it doesn't seem to be controlling the throttle. Let me go get my my RPM gauge, you know, my tack, and just see what it's doing. This way we can cook everything for a little bit, because we want to burn the paint down here a little bit, you know, get it solid. Let's try it again. Yeah, that's 4,000 RPMs. That's too much. Let me see if I can tweak that. I'll be right there. Now, fellas, that's a preliminary, okay? So everything works. Things are sticky. The shift is sticky. I haven't gone through all of that yet, but the engine, when I was testing the engine, I like to pour. You can use two-stroke, but I like to use a mix of tranny fluid and you know, half tranny fluid, half gasoline. Went into the plug hole. I spun it overhead, checked compression. We've been tossing this thing around. It's been sitting for who knows how long. It's smoked a bit, right? And it was a little too high. It's around 4,000 RPMs. I just tweaked a few things a little bit, like I said earlier, just to get, you know, some control over it. You notice I moved the throttle controller up and down. We have a lower RPM, idle-ish or a lower RPM. We have some control now. Let's bring it in. Let's get the oil out of it, and we'll go back over a couple of things. And this way, with good oil in it, we can verify that there's no water in the oil or whatever. We'll have good oil in it, and then we can literally run it up. But we needed to get it warmed up and running and tested, and mostly tested, right? Because I don't know, I've never seen it run up until now, and we want to make sure that the carburetor that I put on or that you may put on is going to be working, and we can get some adjustment out of it before we go any further. Once we get that good oil in there, then we'll be ready to you know, really kind of let it warm up good, get it nice and hot, and get all these adjustments, because it needs to be really warm and hot in order for these adjustments to take hold. And even then, okay, you're going to want to come back and check it again, because things break in. These motors tend to run a little rough. You notice it was hunting a little bit. That's called hunting or surging. It could be too lean. Could just be this, the things are lean because they're not tuned right. And you'll see in the upcoming segments exactly what I'm talking about. Let's get back to it. All right, I got it propped up just a little bit in the front. Yeah, she's sticky. And these motors tend to fart a bit. We'll talk about that later. Let's just see what we get. Yeah, that's good. It is black, bros. Oh my goodness. All right, let that drip. All right, fellas, now that we got some good oil in it, everything else is basically done. I'll put the drive rod, the steering rod on this thing when we're done. So we can get in here and fool around with this, and then when we're done with this and I test it and make sure we do our last minute adjustment, we'll put the cover back on. Okay, so what you saw me do before, the RPM, the high RPM was way too high and I couldn't get it to an idle because this screw was out too far. It was that way, and it wouldn't allow the throttle to come back far enough so we could get an idle. So the plan of action is this. So this little screw here, I didn't adjust it. So as we go up, it actuates this rod over here, which fights against the governor. The governor then fights against the spring that's in here, back and forth until it arrives at a high RPM when this is all the way up, right? Then when we pull it down, we should get a drop in RPM. Now for these motors as they age, if you want to guess, you can go to 3,600 RPM when you're all the way up, no more. This is at 4. That's too high. 3,600. 34 is probably better as we age. And that's about where it is right now without touching this screw. And so what should happen is when this is up, it should override enough to where this screw is not in play. When we bring it down, whatever our lower speed to idle, and when it gets all the way down here, it'll touch this and it'll ground. So we don't need this key, this child-proofing key anymore. I don't connect that. So somewhere around here, we should have, I don't know, 1,900 RPMs, 2,000 RPMs, something, anything lower. You don't have to get that crazy. And this screw, you can sometimes use this screw to compensate if it's kind of dying. We can bring this screw in to get towards this throttle arm here. We have to see what it does. And if you want to bring it up a little bit, you just want to make sure that it's not in the way when you're at full RPM. So once we get it to idle, this is our idle adjustment mixture screw. So we want to kind of turn that in until she starts to stumble. And then bring it out until it smooths out. And these things fart a little, right? It's getting a little older and it's a flathead engine, so they don't run all that smooth. They fart. Keep in mind, you're doing lean best without load. It's just spinning a pulley. That's all it's doing. When it's under load is when it needs all that extra fuel. So, and throttle angle. So be careful. Don't make it too lean, right? When it go into lean best and then pull the screw out, that will richen the mixture. Same thing here. High RPM, all the way up. You bring this in until she starts to stumble a little bit, then bring it out, and then just slow, and then just give it another little tweak, a little bit more on the out, turning it out. Remember, righty-tighty is in, lefty-loosey is out. And that'll sweeten it up, that'll richen it up a little bit, because you want the mixture to have enough extra fuel for when it's under load. You're adjusting it when it's not under load, and you'll tend to make it too lean. And then lastly, fellas, I'll be doing it outside today. It's nice. We're going to bring it outside right now. We've got the good oil in it, so we're safe. Let it run for a little while. Make sure it's warm when you do this. But of course, again, it's going to be nice out. Barometric pressure is going to be high. A lot of this is going to change, fellas, on that snowy, lousy day when it's cold and the barometric pressure dumps. You may have to kind of come back in here. At the very least, you can reach underneath and adjust this. You probably won't be able to get to this unless you drill a hole or something. I don't have to tell you, the nice thing about this is that it's fully adjustable, and when you get comfortable and understand how to adjust one of these, you're going to love it. I just love these carburetors. Oh, perfect. All right, let's get to it. All right, fellas, I got a little more fuel in it. So last time we did a pull start, let's do a electric start. So we're going to bring it up to, I don't know, about midway on the throttle. And we're going to push the choke on, give it some primes, and we'll get it started. We'll let it warm up a little bit, and we'll come back, and then we're going to do our adjustments. So again, this is high speed, this is low speed, and this is your throttle, or what we would consider to be our curb idle throttle stop. All right. 1800. I'm going in. All the way in. Backing out. Oh, it's like that. 27. 29. 3,000. Going back in. 3,170. 27, 26. 2750. That's good. Let's back that out. About 2,000 it likes. 26, 25. Going in. Okay, it's definitely having a problem coming back down. It doesn't like to come down. And so we have it pretty good, but she's not liking this coming back down thing. Yeah, she don't like to come down that low, see? So she just doesn't want to come down that low on an idle. Let's bring it up a little bit. All right, she's tuned. So I backed this screw out just a little bit. It went too far. That's going to set your total. And we were getting around close to 38, 39. So I brought it back down to 36 to 37. Anywhere between 34 and 36. You don't really want to be higher than 36. 34 is great if you don't have slushy snow horror like I have here. What we get here is the nightmare. And these little 5 horsepower engines, the Cummies that you might see on the smaller blowers, they're nice, but they don't have the oomph. This is a 9. I like these motors. You need at least this much because it doesn't snow here a lot. We haven't even had any yet this year, but when it does, it's a nightmare. She's good, fellas. She's running real good. Let's just give it another start. I think what I'll do is I'll wait. Let me let it cool a little bit. I'll come back out in a minute, and I'm going to give it another start just to make sure it didn't get weird on us, because it can get weird. But I wouldn't over adjust it. Somewhere over 2,000 RPMs, wherever it wants to be for an idle, that's fine. Okay, you just want to drop the RPM and keep it running. Right? You're not looking to sip fuel here. This is to perform a job. So you want to walk away, clear something. You don't want to restart it. You want to keep it warm. That's a nice relaxed RPM for this motor. It's a big motor. And then you notice that as I raised it up, we got like around about here, we got like another high RPM out of it, which was nice. It was probably good enough to actually snowblow with. If you didn't have a lot of snow and you just wanted to clean up an area, you probably would want to put it about here. And then total RPM, we went all the way up. So it actually has a bit of a range, which is what you want, because this wasn't working at all when we first started. So I think we're good. I'm going to leave it be. Just let it cool a little bit, and I'll come back and check it, and I'll let you guys know. All right, fellas, let me get you out of here on this, right? I went back over it. It needed a little bit more tweaking. I think I gave it like an hour or so. I went and did a whole bunch of other things, and before it got too late, it was still sunny over there. I went and did it again, and it did require a little bit more adjustment. Now, one of the reasons why is because, like I said, this thing had not run in a long time, and when these motors run a little rough. They tend to be a bit farty or whatever because they're flatheads. And for some reason or other, the Tecumseh, I think because the carburetor drops down low, and that might have something to do with it. It kind of comes up and like that, and whatever. I noticed that they tend to run a little rough. Another reason why they do that, well, because they're not overhead cams, or overhead valves. When they sit for a long time, right, you could have staining and a bit of rust or staining, oxidation and junk on the valves. They're not sealing great. Same thing with the rings and the cylinder walls. Didn't seem to take on any water directly into the engine, but I don't know. I didn't look in there. I can't tell you. You look at this carburetor, though, and there was junk and water, and it had wiped out the carburetor. Now, typically, because it's down low like that, it's when you get water infiltration, it's very hard to come up and in to the engine. Even the way the muffler is designed, these motors don't. They tend not to suffer from water infiltration into the engine, way into the cylinder. However, the overhead valve Briggs motors do, the newer ones, oh my God, this past year I've done so many of them that have been water infiltrated and just messed everything up. So you got to give everything a chance to run. You got to let it cool down. You want a heat cycle. That's going to affect it. Later on that night when I went to drive it in to the garage, I made a spot for it. It was getting late, starting to get dark. It gets dark earlier now, but I don't know, maybe 5. And I went to move it around a little bit. And I think it was either that night or maybe even the next day or something, I went to move it around. And I noticed it, while it was still kind of cold, it stalled at the idle setting. So I went in there. There's a couple holes in the cover. One is for that top screw, which adjusts the throttle position. And the other one is the idle jet. There's 2 holes. And then, of course, on the bottom, you can adjust the main jet. So I had to go back in. I just gave it a little tweak in. Open that throttle blade a little bit. Average RPM for that range, it's a range, okay? There's no real spec that I would follow on that. It's whatever the motor wants to be in terms of its lowest RPM. And again, what affects that is the temperature, the barometric pressure, how much oxygen, your altitude, where you're at, right? I'm at like a couple of feet above sea level. The condition of the engine, there's a lot of factors. The particular carburetor that you have or you're putting on. As long as it's like, I think I wound up with about 3 RPM ranges. So I got the top, that's at 3,600, almost dead on, sweet. You come down, it's whatever it is, 26, whatever. Maybe closer to 3-ish. And then the idle-esque is about 21, 26, 25, I don't remember. It's somewhere around there. Whatever it wants to be. Don't be looking to thinking that you're going to be getting this like, oh, wow, this is really smooth. Great. If you get that, great. Usually the old Briggs engines were able to do that, but not these, right? That's not what you're looking for. Top RPM, plowing into the snow, heavy load. Drop the RPM down a little bit, trailing it around, right? Driving around the property to get to where you need it to be. Move it, warm it up a little bit more, something like that. Don't forget your choke, right? Make sure that's off. I think that's it. Just let me get you out of here. Okay. Any questions? There's not a lot to it, but you should be able to hear me when I tell you I'm going in or I'm coming out. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And these are good carburetors. I want to thank HIPA, right, for helping out with this job. So we should have this one's a customer actually, and he's going to pick it up. I don't know, maybe today. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll see you guys on the next episode of Archie's Garage.